It was supposed to be a routine flight from Denver to Washington, D.C., a 4-hour journey through clear skies. Among the passengers was 12-year-old Ellie Jensen, a quiet, curious girl with a deep love for airplanes. Her father had been a pilot before he passed away in a tragic accident 2 years earlier. Ever since then, Ellie studied every aviation book she could find and spent hours on flight simulators her mother managed to get from a charity foundation. That morning, Ellie and her mother, Clara, were heading to D.C. for a school competition. Ellie had qualified for the National Young Innovators Fair due to her project on aviation safety systems. No one knew that within hours she'd be using that knowledge for something far more real and far more dangerous. About halfway into the flight, turbulence shook the aircraft. The passengers exchanged nervous glances, but no one panicked. The pilot's voice came over the speaker, calm and professional. "Just some rough air, folks. Nothing to worry about." But Ellie noticed something strange. The plane wasn't stabilizing. It tilted sharply to the left, then again to the right. Oxygen masks hadn't dropped, but the engines didn't sound normal to her trained ears. She peered toward the cockpit and noticed something chilling. A flight attendant ran toward the front in a panic. Moments later, the co-pilot came over the intercom, his voice tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing technical difficulties with our navigation system. We are attempting manual control and rerouting. Please remain seated." That's when Ellie's instincts kicked in. She unbuckled her seatbelt despite her mother's protests and made her way quietly to the front of the plane. The flight attendant tried to stop her, but Ellie insisted, "Please, I know how the backup system works. My dad taught me." Perhaps it was desperation or the unusual confidence in her voice, but the crew let her into the cockpit. Inside, both pilots were overwhelmed. The navigation computer had completely failed, and backup systems weren't responding properly. Ellie pointed at a small control panel near the side. "This model still has analog overrides," she said quickly. "You have to recalibrate using the internal compass and adjust the elevation by monitoring this altimeter manually." The pilot looked stunned. "How do you know all this?" "My dad flew this exact model," she said, her voice trembling but steady, "and I've practiced emergencies just like this." With no time to lose, the crew followed her guidance. For the next 15 minutes, Ellie worked beside the professionals, feeding them manual calculations, double-checking dials, recalibrating altitude and direction. Against all odds, they stabilized the plane and rerouted toward a nearby Air Force base in Virginia. The emergency landing was bumpy but safe. Passengers erupted into applause. News vans were already waiting on the tarmac, having heard the pilot's radio message. "We owe our lives to a 12-year-old girl. She saved us all." The next 24 hours were a whirlwind. Reporters flooded Ellie with questions. Her mother, still shaken, couldn't believe what had happened. She just held her daughter close, proud and stunned. But the real surprise came the next morning. A sleek black car pulled up in front of their hotel. A man in a suit stepped out and handed Clara a letter marked with the presidential seal. "Ma'am," he said with a slight smile, "the president would like to meet your daughter. Today." Clara gasped. Ellie just stood frozen, staring at the invitation, her hands shaking. The letter read, "In a time when heroes are rare, you reminded the nation of what courage and brilliance truly mean. It would be my honor to meet you in the White House." President Jameson White. The next few hours felt like a dream. Ellie Jensen, still wearing her simple jeans and sneakers, was escorted through layers of security and straight into the heart of the White House. Her mother walked beside her, overwhelmed by the grandeur, but Ellie's wide eyes weren't focused on the chandeliers or the golden carpets. She kept replaying the plane's near crash in her mind. She didn't feel like a hero, just a girl who remembered what her dad taught her. Inside the Oval Office, President Jameson White stood waiting with a gentle smile. A tall, commanding figure, he walked toward Ellie with open arms. "You must be Ellie," he said, kneeling to her level. "You saved nearly 200 lives. I just wanted to thank you, in person." Ellie blushed and looked down. did what I knew. My dad used to fly planes. He taught me everything." The president looked at her mother. "You must be incredibly proud." Clara nodded, wiping away tears. "He died 2 years ago. I think he would have been proud too." The moment was quiet and powerful. Then the president motioned toward his desk, where a beautifully framed certificate sat. "This is the Presidential Medal of Bravery," he said, placing it in Ellie's hands. "We don't often give this to civilians, especially not kids, but you earned it." Ellie stared at the golden medal, tears welling in her eyes. "And one more thing," the president added, smiling. "I made a few calls to NASA and the U.S. Air Force. They're very impressed by you. Would you be interested in spending a summer at the Kennedy Space Center, working with engineers, maybe even sitting in a flight simulator?" Ellie's mouth fell open. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," he chuckled. "We think you're going to do great things, Ellie." The next week, Ellie's face was on every news channel in America. Schools invited her to speak, aviation organizations sent her letters of admiration, and even retired pilots called to thank her. But Ellie stayed humble. At her school, back in Colorado, when students gathered in the auditorium for a surprise assembly, the principal handed Ellie the microphone and said, "Would you like to say a few words?" Ellie stepped up nervously, the medal glinting around her neck. "I was just a kid on a plane," she said softly. "But my dad used to tell me, knowledge is your parachute, always keep it packed and ready. I guess that's what saved us. So keep learning. You never know when it might save someone's life." The auditorium erupted in applause. From that day on, Ellie wasn't just a name in the news. She was a national inspiration, and though she missed her dad more than ever, she knew he was watching and smiling.